in virtual land. And so finally I am going to have a little chat with Andrew and Julie White. I have had the privilege to know Andrew and Julie for about 20 years of my life. They have traversed the journey of MS and what it's meant for them in the most beautiful way, with their family, with their broader connections, and it's been an absolute honour for me to see their courage, the way that they've worked with each other. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to, I'm sure that it's not been easy to nail it, but if anyone has nailed it, you guys have. And so, and it's been such a privilege for me to be able to see that. So I wanted to ask you guys here today to talk about how you've managed to keep it together, to keep connected to Andrew in your work. Andrew worked in with Holden. Am I allowed to say that? Well, too late now. It's out there. Andrew worked with Holden and had some great relationships with his colleagues, and Julie sort of been there with a family. So Julie, tell me a bit about your family.
We have a lovely family. We have 2 girls married to 2 wonderful partners, and we now have 4 grandchildren.
Fantastic.
So, yes.
And how do you, how have you, Julie, sort of helped keep that family connected to each other as throughout the whole journey? Andrew, how long have you had MS for now?
Since 93.
Since
so
93.
It's 28 years going on 29.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
It is. It is. Julie, what are some of the things, how have you been able to do that?
I don't know that we actually think about it. Andrew was diagnosed the same year as our youngest daughter was diagnosed with celiac disease before she was aged 2. And I remember sitting down on the floor and crying, and then I went, well, that wasn't helpful. Like, it's a good outlet, but it didn't help. So I guess you just get up and get on with it. And Andrew is a glass half full person, so that makes all the difference, because he's always been positive about what's happening. I'm the worrier. It's taken me 10 years not to fatalise things. So
you talk there about it's taking you 10 years to not to fatalise things, and how important has that been for you to think? Do you think it's so easy to be catastrophic in your thinking and it's all disastrous? Do you think that's a really important part of coping?
Repeat the question in another way.
Talking about not being fatalistic about the whole thing.
I'm a person who likes to prepare. So if I think that something's coming down the track, well, take childbirth. I wanted to find out about all the things that could go wrong and prepare for them. So, I went to, seminars on different things and thought, if this happens, I will do this. I tried to do that with MS. Andrew's approach to MS is, I will deal with it when it happens. So we had a big disconnect, and I think it took me probably 10 years to stop trying to prepare. When I say fatalise things, stop trying to say, well, this is probably going to happen, so I'll do this. It probably took 10 years to even start to relax. But I think humour is the big part of what gets us through. We have very black humour, I guess. If you don't laugh, you cry, so you might as well laugh.
True. And what about your girls? What about your girls and keeping connected to them and keeping connected as a family when there's been some pretty huge hurdles? How's that? How do you sort of how have you negotiated being a mum and now grandmum?
I don't know. You just get on with it, I guess. I don't know that we terribly. I don't know how to answer that, because we just live our life, provide the love that we can, love each other.
And I think that's a really important answer, I guess, in that that what it comes back to is just providing love for each other, and that's the connection. The connection is not about all the stuff that goes on, and you can love no matter what, really, can't you? If that's the core of what the connection is, providing that love, then that's the answer itself. So it doesn't need to be a big answer. You don't need to give me 10 tips.
Oh, good. No, I think we've always had a very good friendship as well as being in love with each other. So I guess friendship is the basis for all good relationships. And, you know, we don't try to be friends with our girls, but we just have a very supportive family, I guess.
And what about you, Andrew? I've asked Julie a few questions. Yeah. How have you sort of negotiated, particularly talking about connections, as I said, with all those levels? Yes. How have you sort of negotiated some of those as right back from diagnosis?
Day one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been, I hate the term journey, but it's been an interesting journey because I think, like many people affected by MS, when I was diagnosed, you grapple with who to tell, whether to tell people at work, for example. And at the time I was diagnosed, I had a very big job with lots of responsibility, and I was very uncertain whether I wanted to tell people at work, and I was battling handling the emotions. So that was in that area. Then there was direct family, and I think getting back to our girls, they've grown up with me. They were very young when I was diagnosed with MS, so it's kind of their normal. And so they, you know, today on the weekend, they rang up and said, we're going up to Hillsville Sanctuary. Do you want to come? And there's never been that sense of, oh, this is going to be awkward because we're going to be on the gravel parts in the wheelchair. Excuse me. In fact, I'm proving very useful because here sit two grandchildren most of the time. So you get that comfort with it. And then friends and colleagues. I quit Holden about 9 years ago now, and I still catch up with colleagues. And I have great friends that just come and see me when they're in town or are nearby and want to get together and things like that. So it's sat very comfortably with me, that it's hopefully a mutual benefit as well, that I get a lot from their friendship and their love and their care. But I also hope that they draw a lot from me as well.
One thing I've noticed in our discussions over the many years, Andrew, is that they're only a little bit about MS, and they're usually a lot about every other thing and you have a natural curiosity, and it's very easy to talk to. How important do you think that's been? Did you spend a lot of time talking to your colleagues about MS, or did you concentrate? How did you negotiate that?
Eventually, it's kind of was always in my mind a when you need to, when the situation demands that you need to talk to people about it. That's when it's useful to do it, and quite often.
I have a funny story about that.
All right, I'm going to let you tell it, Julie, because I want to hear a good funny story.
When his boss came to him and said, Andrew, you've got to stop pretending that it's a basketball injury, because people are starting to ask you if you might have an alcohol problem because you're staggering. That's when you need to say something.
I didn't know it was a basketball injury for that long.
It was a sustained injury, it really was. Dragging the leg behind. So it really was really quite interesting for me, because I kind of wanted to hold it in and deal with it myself, and I do, as Julie said before. I am a glass half full sort of guy, so I'm pretty good at dealing with stuff when it comes along most of the time. But I learned that there were a whole lot of people out there that wanted to support me in the workplace. Was just one example of those, and it was a really good experience when I opened up and started to tell people a little more. Did
you feel a sense of relief that you'd opened up and connected?
Yeah, it did, because I saw you. I've talked to a lot of people in MS world about that whole issue of, do I tell people at work or don't I tell people at work? And my background is in human resources, so professionally that becomes an issue as well as for me personally. And fortunately, I had an amazingly supportive organisation, leadership, peers, team members and so on, that when I opened up, and it opened up new opportunities because people wanted to ask questions and I could then engage in that discussion.
Were you surprised at how supportive they were?
A little bit. And I've only, if I look at so I spent from 1993 to 2012 in that workplace, and I probably really only came across 2 leaders in that organisation who were not as constructive as I would have hoped they were. The general level of support to very senior people within the organisation was fabulous, and it was more I didn't know what to expect. So in that sense, it was a level of relief.
Which is a huge vulnerability in itself, really,
Yes.
isn't it? That you don't know what you're going to expect, and that those, I guess, when you're thinking about broader connections, you don't know when you open up that's what that connection is going to look like and how that's going to feel. When you talk about support, what do you think some of the things were that you found, in those connections that you had? What do you think what do you define as support? What were the things that really helped?
Sometimes they're practical issues of, so another kind of funny story, I had a level of reluctance to adopt support technology, and at one stage Julie went out and bought me a walker, and I went, I'm not using that, that's for old folks. When I get old, I'll be happy to use it then. But I found if I drew on people and colleagues, and beyond that into my community, my set of network and my connections, people were only just couldn't do enough to support me. Now, there were some that really threw themselves into it. I had one colleague that used to push me in the wheelchair a lot and really was really helping, but he always did things at 100 miles an hour. And I can't tell you how many times he smashed me into cabinets in the office, which was a little less than helpful. But I can't criticise his enthusiasm and willingness. And there were also things I was involved in, industrial relations negotiating, and people would be very supportive. They knew I was at that stage, I was taking a medication that required self-injection, and it gave me a pretty hard time, and people would be really supportive and get to know my cycles, if you like, and help me out and those sorts of things. But it's little things. The example that comes to mind, even being out in the wheelchair in the street, and people are hesitant to know whether to help. And I always welcome that, and I always thank people profusely, because it just takes the pressure off and you get over that gutter or through that doorway and use less energy and so on, and hopefully make them happy that they reached out and tried to help as well.
That's a really interesting reflection, that that people have that reluctance, but it's better to lean into it and say it's okay to do that. Yes. And would you say that generally it's worse if you don't?
Yes, very much so. I mean, I feel there's a reciprocation in all of that I very much, since I've retired, I want to try and give back. So I do some student mentoring and I help people with their job situation or their applications and things like that. And people are very thankful for that, and I give that out and I draw on the opportunities and experiences that I've had in the past. But I also get an enormous amount out of that, and it energises me and, you know, keeps my mind ticking over and things like that. So that reciprocation is really positive, and that, to use the theme, that level of connection is awesome.
And that sort of makes me reflect on one of the pathways that we think about for wellness and well-being, and particularly used in mental health, is that concept of giving and how important that is, and how and so we just sort of spoke to the carer, from someone from Carers Vic, more about the dangers of vulnerability, but not really as much about how much you can get from that experience, and how much that, again, talking about that reciprocity. Julie, have you sort of found that in terms of being a carer? Do you call yourself a carer?
No.
No, I knew you were going to say that, Jules. I knew you were going to say that.
I was listening to it and
it's like the football injury, isn't it?
You know, you'll appreciate this as a person who came up in the nursing fraternity. She calls herself Nurse Ratchet at times because she feels that it's a reflection of her level of care, which I don't agree with.
I'm not quite sure who calls who that name, but no, I don't see it as that. Because it's also I think to cope with things in life, sometimes you just do. You don't sit back and think about it. So it never occurred to me to think of myself as a carer, because if someone, probably because I'm a person who likes to help others anyway. I guess that's in the personality. It's how I ended up working in a hospital. I think a lot of people who work in hospitals have that sort of bent. So if someone needs help, I'm the kind of person who likes to do that. So it doesn't cause me a huge amount of angst in life. So I would never have thought of calling myself a carer, no.
And what about with your family? And have you been able to sort of carve out enough time, or
No.
No?
There's never enough time. I work 5 days a week, so now we have grandchildren, and I'd like to go out and help the girls, and I need to also help Andrew. And yes, I'm one of those people who doesn't take time to care for myself. I was sitting back going,
maybe you need that
maybe I
gateway.
should do something about that.
Absolutely, it sounds like it, Julie. And so, Andrew, what about you with your family and your girls, and sort of keeping that connection there? And we talked with Thomas about the symptoms of MS and how they add so much barriers. So how do you find that?
Yeah, look, it is. I think I'd bring it back to the whole issue of energy and how much energy you have. I did some work with a consultant a couple of years ago, and he was working with this small business that I was affiliated with, and he talked about, I don't want to talk to the CEO about how much time you have available to get things done. I want to talk about how much energy and where you put your energy. And I think for me that's part of it, that I look at how do I do that, and part of it is pushing through and saying, and maintaining connections is almost the easiest part, in that you can simply pick up a phone and talk to people, and whereas going out and being out and so on is much more demanding, and just being ready to go out and so on and so forth. So it's being realistic and being very conscious of doing things like making sure I'm getting enough sleep, so I'm rested enough to be mindfully engaged with people when I do them, and I'll pick up the phone and talk to the girls or a friend or extended family and so on and so forth, and that's great.
Does it always work out?
No. Sometimes the wheels fall off, literally.
Literally the wheels fall off. Do you are you aware of when that happens, and do you have have you learnt both along the way? Hey, time out sort of concepts. Has that helped you to do it, or do you just pick yourself up when you fall over?
I think we've had to seek professional help along the way. It sounds like we're having a great ride with this, but there have been real difficulties because Andrew was a very sporty person. Played any kind of sport, hired tennis courts, had friends over, played, once or twice a week. And to go from a person who used sport as an outlet, and if he was frustrated or upset about something, he'd go for a run, he'd go out and play some sort of sport. It's been really difficult for Andrew to learn how to become an armchair sports person and find other ways to vent anger, to sort out what to do with frustration. And as a family, we've all had to work on how we deal with MS in that way, because the illness does limit a lot of things that you would normally do. And so you do have to find workarounds, but I think it helps to look on the positive side of things, and we're lucky that Andrew does that, because he looks for, let's not look at the problem, let's look at the solution. And that's a huge part of, I think, what's kept him well. And he also has always been a person who's always wanted a healthy diet. Because we had a daughter with celiac disease, we also had to change the way we ate, which moved towards a healthy diet anyway. So, there's been things that you deal with along the way, but it's been a positive move. And there are things that happen with illness that I wouldn't say you're lucky if you have an illness, but it also enriches relationships, because you do, how can I put it? I'm not saying you're lucky to have an illness, but hardships can be seen as something that you work at and overcome, or they can be something that crushes you. And neither of us want to be crushed. So
what a beautiful way of putting it, Julie. And you certainly haven't been crushed. That is for sure. But I'm sure that there are moments when you have been. And that's when connections, I'm sure, would have really helped as well too, to be able to get you through, and I guess there's that having an illness and that vulnerability that it brings, that you can find the strength in each other, in what you've talked about, the strength in your relationship with each other. That certainly, I imagine it would have been hard to, if you're used to going for a run, to be able to adapt to those things, and to experience that loss and that grief, and then find support through each other as well too. And thank you for sharing that you did get help, because I think that's really important part of the picture. It hasn't, as I said, I'm sure it's not been all roses all the way down in your journey, and so there are times, I guess, when reaching out for help can add real value to it. That is for sure. So thank you for sharing that too. Yeah. Anything else that you've got, Andrew, top tips about before we finish up? You knew I was going to come with my top tips. Yeah. So in terms of those barriers to connecting with people and living with MS, it's certainly your area of expertise as well as HR. So what would you say to someone in the early days, how to keep those and sustain those connections, and what they mean for you?
I think Julie touches on a really important thing. MS is an opportunity. It's kind of like that, because it does open up new opportunities, and if you can sit back and think about what is the way that I'm used to connecting, what would I have done in a professional setting? that I go into a room of people and need to build connections and hopefully influence people to go in a particular direction. How would I do that? And when you step into the MS sphere, it opens up a whole new lot of opportunities. That's really difficult for some people, and I recognise that. People that are perhaps more introverted or are really suffering under their diagnosis, it's hard to see it as an opportunity and reach out. But really, to make that journey successfully, I think you have to build a whole new set of connections and to convert the method and quality of the connections that you already had, and to adapt to that situation. So when I look at the network of connections I have, there are people like yourself in the background, the neurologists, the psychologists, the OTs, the physiotherapists. You need to build up that new set of connections. You still have family and friends and what have you, and you need to change the way in which you've dealt with that. And then, of course, you have work colleagues, and we've spoken about that, and how does that change things. And I've had the opportunity to start working again. I'm working 2 days a week, and that's come through making connections with a company that has a culture that welcomes me and what I can contribute despite the limitations that are there. So the opportunities are kind of out there, but I like to sort of sit back and reflect on, how do I change this? How do I adapt and rebuild this? And ultimately, I think those things have been really important. Yes, I have my medication every 6 months and I take tablets daily and so on. But those connections have been critical in being successful with this impediment.
I like the fact that you define yourself successful, and as I said, I completely agree. It's been humbling for me to share your journey and both of your courage, but it's been an absolute joy to talk to you both today. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your vulnerability, and well, I look forward to speaking to you again. And thank you for your willingness to give today. Thank you both.
Thanks, Jodi.
wraps it up for today. I was just reminded to use my microphone. That wraps it up for today, and I'd really like to thank the people watching, and I hope you've taken home the messages that just really about the value of connection. And when we take the time to pause and reflect on World MS Day, which is coming up on Sunday, the call to action, I guess, which we always like to have when we wrap things up, is to remember the value of connections. Remember that it's not just one person, it's a whole lot of people that make up your connection, that will really help you on the journey and are there to support you on the journey for MS. And so I hope you take home that message and celebrate that and yourselves and all your connections on World MS Day. I look forward to celebrating it with the Victorian crew down at the Walk Run Roll, and I'm sure in New South Wales and ACT and Tassie, I'm sure that on Tassie on Friday there's going to be a great day down at Blundstone Arena. I'm really excited to we'll be part of that, and they're doing a whole lot about research there, so that will be that'll be available as well too via our website afterwards. If you have any concerns, if today we've touched on a few really deeply intense personal sort of concepts and discussions, and if they've brought up any issues for you, please don't hesitate to call us at MS Connect on 1800 042 138, or utilise the many resources available that are there to help people through Carers Victoria, Peers Australia. We've heard from so many people today, Darren down in Hobart. There are people out there, so please reach out if this has touched a raw nerve or upset you in any way. I'd also like to thank there's an amazing team at MSL who help put all of this together, and they're here at Blackburn, so may not be visible, but they're the part of the MS Connect education team, peer support team, linkages team, and all the rest of the teams that certainly MSL is an organisation that has lots of different people and different types of work that they're doing, but they all come together at the one point, which is about you and your support crew, and we are all here for you, so we can reach out at any time. And thank you so much for your attention today. Again, if you've got any questions, please flick them through on the live, and the team will be there to help answer them for you. So thank you, and thank you to all the people who organised it. Thanks to the streaming guys, and it's great to have everyone there. Okay, thanks.